Have you ever just stared at an English word and thought, why on earth is it spelled that way? You are not alone. If you've ever been completely tripped up by words like through, though, or bow, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The whole system can feel, well, completely chaotic. So let's dive into this puzzle and find out what's really going on. Right, this is it. This is the central mystery we're going to solve today. And it's a question that has confused pretty much everyone, from new learners to native speakers, for centuries. Now, the answer isn't simple. It's actually a detective story that's going to take us back through 1,000 years of history, invasions, and one massive linguistic event that literally changed everything. I mean, just look at these guys. The GH in through is totally silent, but in tough, it magically sounds like an F. The K in night and the S in island, well, they just decided not to show up to the party at all. But here's the thing. These aren't just random exceptions. They're clues. Each one of these weird words is like a little fossil, preserving a piece of a much bigger story. Okay, so our first clue takes us way, way back to the beginning. You see, English didn't just appear out of thin air. It has a family, and understanding its roots, where it came from, is absolutely the key to cracking this whole case. That's right. English is a Germanic language. It's a really close cousin to German and Dutch. And what that means is they all started from a common source, a language that linguists call Proto-Germanic. Now, back then, these languages all shared a pretty logical structure, and most importantly, a much more direct link between how a word was spelled and how it sounded. I mean, you can totally see the family resemblance here, can't you? Look at father and vater, or house and house. These core words, they're called cognates. They show us that English started out with a system that made a lot more sense. It was a system where the spelling was actually a really good guide to how you should say the word. So what on earth happened? Well, what happened was history. England, just kind of sitting there at the crossroads of Europe, went through a whole series of invasions and massive cultural shifts. And every new group that showed up brought their language with them, adding thousands of new words and just stirring the whole pot. So first, you've got the Anglo-Saxons, and they established the Germanic foundation of the language. Then, the Vikings sailed in, bringing all these practical, everyday words from Old Norse. But the biggest shakeup, by far, was the Norman conquest in 1066. This event just flooded the language with French words for things like law, government, and high culture. It basically created a language with two tiers. You had your simple Germanic words for the farm, and then your fancy French words for the court. So you might be thinking, aha! That's it. It was the French. They did it. And look, while all those layers of vocabulary definitely made English way more complex, they're actually a bit of a red herring in our mystery. Yeah, they explain why we have so many words, but they don't explain why we pronounce them so strangely. The real culprit is something much, much bigger. And now we get to the main event. The smoking gun. This is the single historical event that is almost single-handedly responsible for this huge disconnect between how English looks and how it sounds. It's called the Great Vowel Shift. Okay, so the Great Vowel Shift was this huge, unstoppable domino effect in how English speakers pronounced their long vowels. And the most vital thing to get here is that this was a change in sound, not in spelling. People just started saying their vowels differently. The sounds literally moved higher up in their mouths. But the way they wrote those words down, that stayed exactly the same. Just take a look at this. Back in Middle English, the word house was pronounced whose. The word time was more like tima, and moon was pronounced closer to moan. You can hear it, right? The sounds all shifted upwards in the mouth. So whose became our house. Tima became time. The spelling was a perfect snapshot of the old pronunciation, but the sound just kept on moving. I mean, just think about what that means for a second. Before this massive change, English spelling actually made sense. It was much more phonetic, a lot like German or Spanish are today. You know that silent K in night? Well, it used to be pronounced. People would have said Knecht. The system worked. And then the Great Vowel Shift came along and scrambled everything. So why didn't the spelling just change to keep up? And this brings us to the final, crucial piece of our puzzle. The sounds of the language were changing, but the spelling got locked in place. And this happened because of a total, perfect storm of historical events that all came together at exactly the wrong time. Let's break it down. First, you have the Black Death, which causes this huge migration of people, and all their regional dialects get mixed up. Then, as society kind of rebuilds itself, English starts to rise as the official language, so it needs to be standardized. Right then, boom, the printing press arrives, and it needs one consistent spelling for everything it prints. And here's the kicker. All of this happens, and the spelling gets locked down while the Great Vowel Shift was still going on. So what this meant was that the printers in London standardized English spelling based on how it was written and spoken right at that particular moment. But the pronunciation hadn't finished changing yet. The spelling got frozen in time while the way people actually spoke the language kept evolving for another 100 years. What we're left with is a situation where we are essentially reading 15th century texts with a 21st century accent. So there we have it. After all that detective work, we have our answer. Let's put these final pieces together and solve this thing once and for all. Why is English spelling so weird? So in the end, while invasions and borrowed words definitely added a lot of complexity, the main culprit, the real reason for the mess, is the Great Vowel Shift. This massive change in pronunciation happened after spelling had already started to be standardized by the printing press. So English spelling isn't really chaotic, it's a historical artifact. It's a snapshot of a language that was spoken very, very differently 500 years ago. And that leaves us with a really fascinating final thought. People sometimes argue that we should just reform English spelling and make it phonetic. But if we did that, if we fixed a word like night to be spelled N-I-T-E, you have to wonder, what connections to its history, its family of words, and the incredible story of its evolution would be lost forever? It's something to think about.